Hello and welcome back to the Workbench. This is where we discuss ceiling fan history, trivia, and technical information. So today we're really going to dig into the history. And there's a reason why. I heard about some claims that were made at Lightovation as to what fans were on the market when a certain well-known fan tycoon started out in the fan industry in around 73, 75. And some of those claims were pretty outrageous and pretty wrong. And so I wanted to sort of address them by really digging into what actually was on the market in the 60s and early 70s. And we're going to go pretty much into 79 and talk about what was actually offered when fans became popular again, largely due to Casablanca, but also Moss, Encon, A&G, other manufacturers. So what was the question is, what was around before Casablanca, before Moss, before Encon, before the names that we recognize as kind of jump-starting the fan industry in the mid to late 70s. So, and we're not going to talk about antiques. That is a different video, and so far I haven't really dug much into antiques, except of course for the Hunter originals with Brian. We may in the future. I've definitely had some requests for it, but for now this is more of a vintage series. You know, we're mainly trying to cover 60s through 90s. So we're going to start in 62 because that is the possible first year for the blender fan. We don't know for sure. We've heard that it possibly could have initiated that lineup in 62, but we don't know that for sure. That would have been the pull chain through 4-blade, kind of cardboardy wood blades, clockwise rotation, 36-inch, 52-inch. We also know that round noses were still being sold in 62, and Hunter was still selling originals. You want to find out more about any of those things, you can go to the Hunter video, and you can go to the first Emerson video in our recent series. Okay, next big thing. In 1965, there was a company called LaFleur Electric that was importing a 56-inch 7-speed fan and a 32-inch 3-speed fan. I've been trying to figure out what those fans were. I don't know for sure. Presumably they were from Hong Kong because U.S.-Taiwan relations were not good at that time, and China wasn't making fans yet, so presumably Hong Kong. I suppose also could have been Japan, but that's pretty unlikely. We kind of know the major players in Japan. They also were not making 3-blade fans. We'll get into that in a little bit. They're more making 4-blade fans. So who could it be? It could be SMC, could be DEMCO, could be Wingtat. Those are the ones we know for sure. It could be. There's some other possibilities, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But that's 65. That is the first documented evidence of there being import fans, and we know that they were 3 metal-bladed, 56-inch and 32-inch, which is interesting, and 7-speed, which was interesting, and 3-speed. So that is 1965. Also in 1965 is when Wilcorp starts importing SMC fans into Canada. Now, this is mostly going to be a U.S. video. It's not going to be a Canada-centric video, but we are going to mention things like that. Those we know were SMC cast, 56-inch and 36-inch, and 5-speed control. And we know what the cast SMCs looked like. They didn't change much until, I think, the late 70s. So, 1966, LaFleur Electric is still the first documented U.S. company to be importing fans. Now they are 56-inch and 36-inch 5-speed. So they could be SMC for sure now. They could be, again, DEMCO. It's unlikely that they were DEMCO because we talk about DEMCO in details in the Gulf Coast DEMCO video, Dinway. And they were pretty sure that the Gulf Coast people were the first to do Dinway. But it's possible. You know, again, could be Wingtat, and we'll talk about Wingtat a little bit more. 1967 is the first confirmed year of the blender fan. And again, it is the 4-blade with wood blades, clockwise rotation, and the pull chain through the center. Also confirmed that there are no more round noses. So at this point, 67, the only company that is selling oil bath fans brand new is Hunter. There's also a company called Handyman Builders that's importing 56-inch and 36-inch 5-blade SMCs. They're in the same general region as LaFleur, which might make you think maybe they're the same fans as LaFleur, but they're a lot cheaper than LaFleur. So that makes me think that the LaFleur fans are definitely not SMC, because if the SMCs went for cheaper, then the LaFleur fans would be cheaper. I'm guessing whoever LaFleur was buying from was charging more than SMC was charging. So again, I'm kind of ruling out SMC, kind of ruling out Dinway, which leaves Wingtat or some less, less major players. We'll keep talking. 1970, there's a company called Segaco of Jackson, Mississippi, that is importing 48-inch, first sighting of a size that doesn't start with a 5 or a 3, 5-speed fans in an ivory color only. Absolutely no clue what these fans are. 48-inch, who was doing 48-inch around then? Could be a fly-by-night factory, definitely could be any of the other ones we talked about. 1971 is when we first have a picture of the LaFleur fans. And this picture is going to be an advertising slideshow number 13. If you want to look for it, it's going to be an advertising folder category number 13 in Facebook. So you can go look for this picture. It has 3 rounded blades, not curved tip, but rounded. It has a pointed motor with a stripe, much like a Union, but we know Union didn't exist at this time. And the canopies are bellish, which kind of rules out Tat, because their canopies were very squat, but they could have used different canopies at that time, so we don't know for sure. That's 71. So let me clarify. 71 is the first picture we see of LaFleur, but it is in fact a picture. It is a line drawing, whereas 72 is the first picture we see that's actually a photograph. The motor is round with an indented sideband, like some Unions, like some Safers, like some Tats. It has bell canopies. It has rounded blades. Again, they're not curved tip. They're just rounded tip. So they're straight but rounded. Again, kind of similar to what Tat offered. The thing that's crazy about 72 is that they have a nut on the bottom and they're available to be light adaptable. So my thing was, what import company was making light adaptable fans in 72? Union wasn't even on the scene yet, but they didn't start making light adaptable fans until the late 70s. Dinway, I don't know when they started making theirs light adaptable. Tat's first fans weren't light adaptable. SMC, I don't think made light adaptable fans until the late 70s. So really, I'm very curious as to who this could be. I have a few theories. I guess it's as good a time as any to talk about those theories. One is that, in the Union video, we talk a great deal about Joseph Lau, the founder of Union and Evergo, and his brother Thomas, and they started together in 73. But they made some mention of going into the family business. So what if the Lau family had a fan factory before 73 under a different name? Nothing, I can't find anything else about that at all, but it's just a theory. It's a theory. Another thing is that we very rarely talk about New Fan, Golden Fan, View Fan. We don't know much about their history at all, other than they were owned by China. They were owned by Chinese families and Chinese companies, but the factories were in Hong Kong until 85. So New Fan was incorporated in 73, but they could have existed before incorporation. And again, they were New Fan until 73. Then in 78, they moved their headquarters to China and became Golden Fan. And then in 85, they moved their factory to China and became View Fan. So that's a possibility. Maybe they were around before 73. Again, we know Tat was around. It's just that their fans looked different than what was being pictured here. And again, trying to find a light adaptable option. So this is something I would love to hear your thoughts about. I would love to hear comments, and if other people are able to research what light adaptable imports were available in 72. But I think that's pretty significant to know that they did, in fact, exist. So 72 was also the founding of A&G Machinery. It was also the first year of Wingtat fans being advertised in the U.S. Now, again, we've talked about the possibility that Wingtat supplied some of these other companies, unconfirmed, but we do know that as of 1972, Wingtat fans were being sold in the U.S. as Wingtat, and the version that they were selling is exactly like what Metal Pete has in the bay at the Metal Barn. They have the pancake motor with straight, curved end blades and a choke control. So that was 1972. 1973 is when A&G Fanlites start appearing in ads as Casablanca, which is significant because while that may have been the year that Burton started tinkering, it was the Burton Company. It wasn't Casablanca at that point, and they definitely weren't selling whole, fleshed-out single fans, whereas A&G was selling their Fanlites as Casablanca in 1973. So they beat Casablanca to the punch quite a bit there. Also in 73, a company called Cost Less Imports was selling SMC fans in 36-inch, 48-inch, and 56-inch sizes. 1974, Emerson rebrands the blender fan as Casablanca, but does not change the style. It is still the same exact fan. Also in 1974, again before Casablanca was making standalone fans, they were just making belt drive fans. A&G now offers brass, chrome, cane blades, the mini fan light, and many different light kit options with many different floral glass. Also in 1974, that was the founding of Envirofan. So now we know Envirofan started by importing Union fans. Another big player before 75. So 75, of course, we know is the big year for the fan industry. That is when Casablanca was first established as Casablanca. It is when Hunter starts advertising as Olde Tyme. It's also the very first year of a light kit. Before then, for the antiques era, you either bought a fan with a light, which was generally called the hotel version, or you bought a fan without a light. The A&G Fanlight was, of course, a light. And again, we have that ad from LaFleur, or multiple ads from LaFleur in 72 that advertises light adaptable, but I'm assuming they were just retrofitting, you know, a light fixture on the bottom as opposed to there being a dedicated fan light. But in 75 is when ceiling fan light kits started to be marketed, and fans were overall, in general, being marketed as light kit adaptable, and Hunter was the one that started that. Hansen, also in 75, introduced the Lights Fantastic. We've talked about that. That was an original or a blender fan inside a lighted cage. 75 was the first year for Gulf Coast, which is importing Dinway and DEMCO fans. 75 was the first year of the Georgetown Fan Company, which made those gear-driven fans that looked like a heat cycler and had a light option. 75 was the first year of Westinghouse ceiling fans, not antiques, but imported Westinghouse ceiling fans made by Weatherite. 75 was the first year of Carib, aka Palco, which were, I believe, relabeled Unions in 75. 75 was the founding of Homestead, which were retrofitting Hunter fans with fancy parts. 75 was the first year that Canarm starts importing ceiling fans again from Union. 75 was the founding of Encon. Okay, 1976, the A&G Tornado, Toronado. I think I've called it a tornado in every single video. It's actually named after a car. It's the Toronado. I always assumed it was named after the tornado because it is the first air-moving A&G ceiling fan, and those CEC motors fly like a banshee. Do banshees fly? I think they scream. It flies like a G6. That's a song. So 76 is the introduction of the A&G Tornado. It is the first functional fan before Casablanca is making functional decorative fans. Again, we have a few other companies that, like, you know, Homestead is retrofitting fans to making them decorative. Hansen is retrofitting fans to make them decorative. But up till that point, Casablanca, 75 was their year making gear drive, belt drive fans like the CB1. It was the year Georgetown Fan Company was making gear drive fans. A&G was making fan lights. Fans were either lights or they were decorative, or they were utilitarian like an original and you could stick a light on the bottom. In 1976, we had the first fan that was intended to be both decorative and functional with the A&G Tornado. Again, Casablanca started putting real motors in their fans. But we know that wasn't until 76 because Tom Frampton told the story of going to Sears and buying a fan and taking the motor out of that and putting it in the first Casablanca fan to have a real motor. And in fact, the first several Casablanca fans to have real motors, according to Tom, he would go, or Burton would go, or whoever would go to Sears and buy up all their fans and pull all the motors out and scrap everything else, and they'd put those motors in their decorative Casablanca fans. Well, as we know from the previous Emerson series, Sears didn't start selling fans on a large scale until 76. They had a few trial runs in 75, mostly in the South, mostly in Texas, none in California that I can find. So, you know, Casablanca didn't even experiment with putting motors in fans until 76, and A&G already had a line of fans advertised as being functional and decorative in 76 with the Toronado. 76 is also when Emerson introduces the heat fan, the Casablanca, which is a blender with a switch housing, shrouded blenders, which was their first attempt at a decorative fan, and light kits. Again, Hunter was the first company to offer dedicated fan light kits in 75, and Emerson was the second in 76, and I have a feeling that they bought them both from the same supplier because they seem very identical. Also in 76, Hunter introduces the first low-profile fan, which is an original with a flat canopy similar to the vaulted ceiling canopy. That's a big deal. We very rarely see those in the wild, but they were designed so you could mount a fan closer to the ceiling. No one else was doing that. 76, we talked about how Casablanca was making fans in 75, but realistically, they didn't start advertising fans until 76. I think that's important to note. 75 is when they officially started the fan business, and they were officially Casablanca Fan Company. Again, Tom and Burton were tinkering, I think, as early as 73 as the Burton Company. 75 was when it became Casablanca, but 76 is when they first started advertising ceiling fans. And all the fans that appear as Casablanca, other than the Emerson Casablanca and the A&G Casablanca, all of the Casablanca Fan Company of Pasadena, California fans that appear in ads in 1976 are all the gear-driven CB1. So even though they were essentially tinkering with fans with a real motor in it as early as 76, and presumably offering them, they were not a large-scale item the way that they were for A&G in 76. A&G was all over the place in 76. Casablanca was still a relatively small company by comparison, which is crazy in hindsight when given what happened. So, again, that was 1976. The first Carib, aka Palco, ceiling fans were offered with light kits in 76. The first Phil Rich ceiling fans were introduced in 1976. And 1976 was also the first year of Envirofan distribution. They were round motor unions. 76 was a big year. Okay. 77. Hunter introduces the two-piece canopy, which survives to this day and allows you to mount the fan close or not close. Cane blades. Again, A&G did that first, but Hunter, is known for it now. Wood blades and vents for 36-inch fans. Up until that point, the 36-inch Hunters were still very utilitarian. 1977 is the first year that Casablanca introduces a full line of fans with the Victorian, aka the CB1, the Zephyr, the Columbia, the Broadway, etc. 77 is the first year of Casablanca's full line of fans. 77 was also the year that Moss was founded. So this is kind of when the tables are starting to turn, because again, 76, A&G was still a much bigger player than Casablanca, despite what people from Casablanca would like you to believe, or people from Fanimation. But 77 was when the tables started turning. 78. Hunter introduces the 2.5 amp motor, which is the version that we are all most familiar with. Again, we have a full video on Hunter and Robbins and Myers and all of that. Emerson introduces the friction drive, which is their first full attempt at a decorative fan with a variable speed control, fake wood grain blades, etc. It's not just putting a housing on a fan. In this case, it's putting a housing and fake wood grain on a terrible fan. Emerson introduces the friction drive. ERS starts importing SMCs. So they become a slightly bigger player in the 70s, but again, we're still very early in the import game, and ERS was early in the import game with 78. Evergo was founded in 78. Again, so Union was a joint venture between Thomas and Joseph Lau, and then he basically converted it into Evergo. That was him on top and Thomas below in 78. We went into much greater detail about that in the Joseph Lau video, which is fascinating. Dayton Laskos first appear in Grainger in 78. Now, again, we have patents, in U.S. patents for Sanyo products dating back to 75, but the earliest that I can find evidence of them actually being sold in the U.S. is through Grainger in 78. Okay, 79. This is the last year we're going to cover because this is the last year of the 70s, and this is when things really start to explode. 79 is when Emerson first introduces their full line of fans with the Casablanca Classic, with real wood blades, and, we talk about that in the Emerson video. A full line of fans of Emerson. A&G introduces their first electrically reversible fan. Now, it's not that electrically reversible fans didn't exist before then. We know they did. In fact, Emerson had electrically reversible round noses and long noses and whatnot. Hunter already had adapter reversible irons. To my knowledge, A&G's electrically reversible fan in 79 was the first electrically reversible fan, first electrically reversible import fan that was advertised as that, as being, for winter, summer, etc. Nutone fans at first appear. Southern Fan Co. is founded in 79. FASCO fans first appear. Of course, FASCO's been around for decades before, but that's their first year. We have a whole video on FASCO. We have a whole video on Southern Fan Company. 79 is the first year that Homestead starts making complete fans. 79 is the first year that Sanyo and Laskos fans appear in the U.S. outside of Grainger. 79 is the first year that Kodap starts importing fans. 79 is the year that Key Largo is founded. 79 is the year that Satellite is founded. And 79 is the year of the first Unipack ceiling fan by Encon. Those were the players in the game at 79. So everybody that I've listed in the video up until this point was around in 79. And of course, 80, 81 is when the U.S. companies start popping up. The import companies start popping up. It becomes the wild, wild west of ceiling fans. But that is what was in existence in the 60s and 70s. So, I hope you learned something from that video. I learned something from that video. There's a lot I didn't know. I definitely am very curious about some of this early stuff that we don't have pictures of. We may have found these fans already and just not known what they were if they weren't labeled, or we didn't know how old they were, or something to that effect. Or they could have been imported. Well, I mean, they're all imported into areas that were, very hot and had high turnover for fans, like Mississippi, Florida, Texas, etc. So maybe they're all gone. I don't know. But I will be keeping an eye out and doing further research. I'm probably going to do an entire video on the LaFleur Fan Company. I'd like to learn some more about them first. But they were obviously an early player in the game, and importing fans. Other thing I didn't mention, just because I don't have any documented proof of it, is that I've heard that Grainger imported SMCs as early as the 50s. We know SMC was around in the 50s. We know Grainger was around in the 50s. I've never seen any evidence of it, but it certainly could happen. So, I hope you have enjoyed this learning experience. I'm certainly glad to know what was actually around in the early 70s, as opposed to what other people would like you to believe, and what I've said in the past, which has in some cases been wrong and been more in line with what other people would like you to believe. So it's my error as much as anyone else's, and I'm glad to have been able to do some research and learn some more facts to flesh it out. So if you like this series, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to listen to this series while you drive or while you work, go to Spotify, go to Anchor Podcasts, go to Apple Podcasts, go to anywhere podcasts are sold, and subscribe. Please continue to support our sponsors by going to buyfanstick.com, fanstick.biz, lightstick.biz, rickersheep.com, and the newly minted buyfanstickxxx.com. As always, thanks for watching, and continue to buy Fanstick.